Hi folks, Kirk Tousaw here with another edition of Legalese. Thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk about a few cases here in Canada and some changes to the existing medical marijuana access regulatory scheme, or some proposed, and I'll use Health Canada's language here, improvements to that scheme. First, let me give you an update on a couple of things. With respect to Mark Emery, you can find out more about him at freemark.ca, but he continues to languish in a U.S. federal penitentiary. We continue to ask people to support him, and you can go to freemark.ca to find out precisely how you can do that. Second, with respect to the case of R.V. Mernagh, you'll remember in my last episode we talked about that decision out of the Ontario trial court level, invalidating the government's entire medical marijuana scheme, and in fact declaring sections 4 prohibiting possession and 7 prohibiting production of marijuana to be unconstitutional. The government was given 90 days to fix the problems with the medical system. The government sought extra time. The government proposed that it was going to make improvements to the program and put out a public consultation document. There was a hearing before the Ontario Court of Appeal, and the government was granted additional time. And so the prohibition on possession and production remain in place pending a decision in the Court of Appeal on Mernagh. My foundation, the Beyond Prohibition Foundation, which you can find at yprohibition.ca, is planning to seek intervention status. I know the BC Civil Liberties Association is planning to seek intervention status in that appeal. We expect to be making those arguments in the fall of this year, and it's anticipated that the case will be heard by a panel of the Ontario Court of Appeal sometime in the spring of next year, probably March 2012. So stay tuned for updates on that case as it develops. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that the government put out a consultation document. You can have a look at it. Just Google Health Canada improvements to medical marijuana and it'll come up. But essentially what the government is proposing is to revamp the medical scheme, and they're asking the public to comment on it. You have until July 31st, 2011 to put in your consultation. You can sign a petition, a form letter petition at yprohibition.ca. I encourage people to do that. The gist of the so-called improvements are these. The government is getting out of the medical marijuana business entirely, or as much as they possibly can. They are going to move to a scheme whereby you visit your doctor signs some unspecified piece of paper allowing you lawful access to medical marijuana. You then take that piece of paper to one of the government's lawful and authorized distributors, and they ship marijuana to you. The government is saying that they're going to phase out all personal production licenses and all designated production licenses. In other words, people are going to lose the right to produce for themselves or have a caregiver produce for them. That is no time frame on that. It's expected to happen sometime in the next 18 months to 2 years, perhaps sooner. And so people need to be aware that it's being contemplated. The licensed dealers will basically distribute direct to patients. It does not appear that the government is prepared to license compassion clubs to distribute on a community-based level. Obviously, I think that's a tremendous mistake. And it remains to be seen how many private companies or people are going to be allowed to produce, what the requirements for bidding on that contract are going to be, and whether or not what I'll call ordinary or sort of not under the thumb of government companies will be able to participate in that process. Now, the foundation is preparing a detailed submission, but the gist of our issues with these so-called improvements really boil down to a few things. Number one, we think it's a good move to get rid of the onerous 33-page application form and the many months of waiting that you have to go through when you apply to the government. We believe, as we always have, that when your physician or healthcare practitioner approves or signs off on your medical marijuana use, at that point you should be legal just like any other controlled substance. Now, we certainly think, consistent with the spirit and the letter of the decision in Mernagh, and the complaints that we've heard over the last 10 decades with this program, that the government shouldn't just have physicians signing these forms. Naturopaths, doctors of traditional Chinese medicine, nurse practitioners, all have some level of prescribing authority, at least in British Columbia and in many other provinces. And they too should be able to be signatories giving patients the ability to lawfully access medical marijuana. So that's number one. Number two, you must, as a federal government, retain some form of identification system. It is already the case that police have a difficult time even recognizing the existing identification cards, and medical marijuana consumers, lawful medical marijuana consumers, continue to be harassed regularly by law enforcement authorities. I can only imagine the chaos that will ensue if we go to a system whereby people don't have ID anymore. They simply have something from their doctor. That is undoubtedly going to present some kind of issues. So the government must give people some way of being free from unnecessary and unwanted contact with law enforcement authorities for their choice of medicine. Number three, patient production, self-production for their own medical need must be retained. And what I'll call caregiver production must also be retained. In other words, somebody producing for their wife, their daughter, their son, their mother, their father, a cousin, a close friend, something like that has to exist within the existing scheme. And it has to exist so that patients can preserve their genetics that they use to treat their symptoms and conditions. It has to exist so that those who aren't going to be able to afford the private companies' marijuana can produce for themselves. And it has to exist because people have a right to grow a benign plant for their medical use in this country. I anticipate if those licenses are phased out that there will be litigation, swift litigation, and we will be trying to hold the government to account. And finally, to the extent that the government is going to license private companies to produce marijuana, the barriers to entry must be low enough for people to qualify and businesses to qualify. And there has to be a scheme whereby existing compassion clubs who have all the knowledge, who have all the experience, who have all the strains and the genetics and the byproducts already on the shelves. There must be a way to license these community-based dispensaries so that people can go in, can speak to knowledgeable people about the products, can see the products, can buy a variety of products, can see what works for them, can give that feedback to the dispensaries, and can continue the good work that these organizations have been doing across Canada for more than a decade now. It's absolutely critical that there be this form of community-based dispensing. And so we're urging the government, as the courts have done, as so many have done over the years, to sit down with the clubs, license the clubs producers who have all the experience of producing marijuana for medical purposes in this country, and come to some form of regulatory scheme that's going to work for everyone. Unfortunately, the way the government's program looks now, it may not meet the constitutional muster that it must meet in order to satisfy the courts. And so again, I urge people to write Minister of Health, to go online, to submit comments to Health Canada on these proposed improvements and changes to the scheme, and make your voice heard, because now's the time to do it. Finally, I'll update you on the status of the Section 2 religious use challenge that I'm pursuing on behalf of Chris Bennett. You can certainly see some of the past shows for the details on that, but essentially Mr. Bennett applied for an exemption from the marijuana laws so that he could produce and possess marijuana for his personal religious use. The Minister of Health turned him down. We sought judicial review in the federal courts, and I'm pleased to be able to report that we anticipate getting trial dates sometime before the end of October of this year, and we could have a decision before the end of the year. That dovetails nicely with an existing piece of religious-based litigation ongoing in Ontario, and it's our anticipation that the two cases may wind their way up the system together and potentially even meet in the Supreme Court of Canada, so that Canadians who use marijuana for religious or spiritual purposes can no longer be persecuted and prosecuted and arrested and jailed for practicing their religion. I think we've come a long way as a country, and it's time that we stopped persecuting religious minorities in this way simply because their sacrament happens to be the cannabis plant rather than any of the other host of sacraments that are perfectly lawful in Canada. So a lot of exciting things happening in the fall and in the spring of next year. Tons of developments. Please continue to do your part to help end marijuana prohibition in this country. Get active. Join whyprohibition.ca. Go to cannabisculture.com. Shop at Cannabis Culture stores. Visit the lounge. Support activist businesses. Support your local dispensaries. And make sure that what you're doing contributes to the ending of marijuana prohibition in Canada, because we cannot do it without the support of everyone out there. And we need it now more than ever to fight back against Harper and his continuing war against the cannabis culture. And just as a final note, in case you missed the Stats Canada report, marijuana possession arrests last year jumped 14%. Simple possession arrests, 58,000 Canadians were arrested for simple marijuana possession last year. It is absolutely shocking. It is an absolute national travesty and tragedy. Those are lives being ruined by contact with the criminal justice system. It is engendering a culture of disrespect for the rule of law. We know that millions of Canadians consume marijuana unlawfully every month in this country, and it is an absolute tragedy that these people are turned into criminals for their rational preference for this benign and really beneficial plant. And so we need you to get active. We need to end this as quickly as possible. We need to fight back against the war that's being fought by Harper and his culture warriors. Please get active. whyprohibition.ca, cannabisculture.com. Do your part to help end marijuana prohibition. Thanks very much.